Green hydrogen produced with renewable energy will decarbonize industries, provide long-duration energy storage, and fuel heavy-duty transport. To make trade in green hydrogen beneficial for producer and consumer countries, we need ambitious sustainability standards. How can we harmonize these standards around the globe to ensure everybody benefits from this new industry?
Welcome back, everyone. Can you believe it? This is the final panel of our 10th Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. It's amazing because it always goes so fast at the end. Our look at accelerating the global energy transition has included many mentions of green hydrogen, but now we want to take a really deep dive. We want to talk in particular about sustainability standards because they are a crucial prerequisite in the view of many who have spoken here already to scaling up both production and transport of green hydrogen. And as you know, dear audience, hydrogen produced with renewable energy offers groundbreaking paths for decarbonizing sectors in which there haven't been very good options until now, meaning those segments of transport and industry where electrification is difficult or impossible. And green hydrogen also helps solve the long-running challenge of energy storage. Yet, the green hydrogen industry is still in its infancy, and physical trade in green hydrogen and its derivatives has yet to really take off, not least due to a lack of technical and regulatory rules for harmonizing and standardizing the needs and modalities of suppliers on the one hand and off-takers on the other. Our panel aims to illuminate the current challenges. Eliminating would also be great, but that might be a little more of a reach. Illuminate the current challenges in scaling up the international market for green hydrogen and also trade in green hydrogen. And we want to ask especially how we can all work together to overcome challenges holding back development of this crucial commodity. We have a fantastic panel to share insights and experience. It's a great honor to welcome them, starting here next to me with His Excellency Salim Al-Aoufi. He's Minister of Energy and Minerals for the Sultanate of Oman. He's responsible for a portfolio that includes renewables and hydrogen, along with exploration and production of hydrocarbons, and electricity and mining regulatory responsibilities. And he has served as CEO of the Public Authority for Civil Aviation. It's great to have you with us, Excellency. We also had the opportunity already to meet Namibia's Minister of Mines and Energy, Tom Aweyendo, during the opening session, and it's great to have you back here on the stage, Excellency. The minister has also served as Director General of the National Planning Commission, where he oversaw development of Namibia's 4th National Development Plan, and he has held the post of Governor of the Central Bank. Thank you so much for being here. Seated next to him, Rachel Fakhri is Policy Director for Emerging Technologies and the Climate and Clean Energy Program at the US-based Natural Resources Defense Council, leading advocacy around emerging technologies, working to encourage federal investment in research, development, and deployment, and also to ensure the responsible development of renewable hydrogen. Great to have you with us. I'm also very pleased to welcome Sungat Kutaovic Yesimkhanov. He is the Vice Minister of Energy for Kazakhstan. He's an engineer and has held various high-level posts in government, including serving as president of the Expert Group on Energy and as chairman of the Atomic and Energy Supervising Authority of Kazakhstan. And please note that he will speak in Russian, so you will perhaps want to get out your translation devices later on for that. And Jonas Moberg is also with us. He is CEO of the Global Green Hydrogen Organization. Previously, he held key positions at the global commodities supply company Trafigura, including global head of corporate and government affairs. He also served as head of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative and as an advisor to UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Wonderful to have you with us as well. And joining us virtually, you see her on your screens, dear ladies and gentlemen, is Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Energy, Svitlana Glinchuk. She is an economist and previously served as director of the Reform Support Office at the ministry and also has worked with the World Bank. Dear audience, before we begin with our panel, let's do one last Slido question. And here is the question. It's essentially asking for your perspective on the biggest challengers for suppliers and off-takers of green hydrogen. Which obstacles do you think most retard the evolution of international trade in this commodity? And the choices that we have listed are high production costs, high trade and transportation costs, sales price uncertainty, missing infrastructure, non-uniform sustainability standards and certification schemes, too little finance, unclear political framework conditions, or other. And please vote now, and we'll come back in a little while to get that result. And now I would like to get our panel's take on some of the challenges that you see. And also, I'd like to ask all of you to talk a little bit about your own efforts to create a flourishing market. That's going to keep developing, Jonas. So this is undoubtedly not the final result. Let me begin with you, Minister Al Aufi, if I may. Oman aspires to become one of the world's leading green export hydrogen exporters by 2030. And to advance that strategy, you've adopted a program known as Hydrom 2 years ago to implement a master plan for the sector and to oversee project development. Tell us, please, about the current status of green hydrogen projects, especially in regard to trade. What links are you already forging with international off-takers, and what do you see as the greatest challenge to scaling up those first shipments?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to this event, and congratulations on your 10th anniversary of this particular forum. And again, congratulations on a very successful event over yesterday and today. Definitely very well attended. And we certainly enjoyed a lot of interactions with many companies and government partners as well. As far as what's happening in Oman, of course, we started the journey a few years back, like many other countries as well. And to date, what we've done is we have identified and locked something like 65,000 square kilometers of land dedicated for renewable energy and hydrogen, of which 50,000 is primarily dedicated for the development of the hydrogen economy. From the 50,000 square kilometer, we have been successful in auctioning and signing agreements for up to 2,000 and a bit, 1,000 square kilometers. That 6 agreements have been signed to date. An existing auction is ongoing, and we are potentially signing 2 more agreements by middle of, or probably end of next month. In total, they will get us very well on our path toward achieving 1 million tons of hydrogen by 2030. And of course, part of it will be consumed locally, and part of it will be converted into whatever derivative that will ultimately allow us to export it to the different parts of the world. And of course, it's no secret, Europe is a primary contender for some of that volume, Germany specifically, but of course the other countries as well. The Far East, and that's also our traditional market. We have been in communication with almost all the potential markets available in Europe as well as the Far East. The consortiums or the areas that we've signed, the 6 areas I've mentioned, they're all international consortiums from Europe as well as the Far East, and sometimes it's a combination of both. So in one of the areas we have Korean-led together with a French company, Thai, and other Korean companies as well. And others, of course, different Japanese are there, the Germans are there, and so on. In terms of what have we done to make this whole thing more transparent, I mentioned the land. We have also finalized and made available and public our policies and regulation with regards to hydrogen development and hydrogen investment. We have established a dedicated company only to orchestrate and manage the entire hydrogen economy, separate from the ministry. So we set the policies. The Hydrom, the company that we created, is the orchestrator that is also auctioning the plots and managing the entire interactions with the developers, signing the use of right agreement and all the different terms and conditions of the agreement, and following up with the developers in terms of support and so on. And of course, keeping them checked with regards to the different terms and conditions agreed. We've been, as I mentioned, talking to pretty much all the potential buyers. We've been here, of course, in Germany since the 17th. So we started with many of our traditional partners, trying to understand their plans, their challenges, sharing our challenges with them. And I'm happy to see that sales price uncertainty is scoring high, because in my mind, that's probably one of the biggest items. We can work on the cost, and we're doing everything we can from our side to work on reducing the cost. For example, we have decided and already working toward creating a common infrastructure that will supply water to all the developers and ultimately collect the hydrogen and transport it to the ports and the renewable energy. So there's a lot of work happening, and sometimes we're accused of moving way too fast for what we're trying to do, but I think someone has to have a leap of faith in terms of where this economy is going, and I think we're making the right move, and only time will test whether we are making the right decisions or not.
Moving fast is one of the reasons you're here, and the same goes for your neighbor here on this panel, Minister Alwendo. If I may come to you, Namibia is also one of the first movers here. You're aiming to launch production of green hydrogen in 2 years and to produce 300,000 tons per year by 2030, most of that for export. So tell us a little bit more about your project pipeline at the moment and how project developers cope with the chicken and egg problem of demand and supply essentially waiting for each other, which also has something to do with. We're not showing you the graphic yet, dear ladies and gentlemen, but I will reveal that sales price uncertainty is number 2. So, Minister.
Thank you very much once again for inviting me to be on this panel. Namibia's story is not dissimilar from my neighbor here, Oman, but I don't want to say we are competitors. I think we are collaborators. Yes, as you say, we have started just over 2 years ago, looking at our economic growth strategic path, how we can grow the economy. And we look at the resources that we have got, and we actually realize that Namibia is one of those countries where we have very quality resources for renewable energy. You can talk about wind, you can talk about solar, and we got plenty of land. Namibia is one of those, we always say, Namibia is twice the size of France, but we only got 3 million people. So we got plenty of land. So as part of our economic strategy, then we say, look, given the climate change, the energy transition issues, we do have that resource that you can actually leverage on, that you can use to be part of this transition. We then went out on the request for proposal, internationally issued this request for proposals to identify investors that can work with us to develop this green hydrogen molecules. We had very good response from the markets, those who wanted to work with us, and we had a thorough scrutiny of those proposals that we got. The biggest criteria we put in this to make sure that whatever we are going to do is going to be useful, it's going to be a catalyst for economic development, not simply producing molecule that is going to be exported. We then identify a group of investors that we then agreed to work with. And since they have been working on this one large project, the company called Hyphen, we have already signed an agreement with them. It's a long-term agreement that they're going to guide how we are going to be doing this. But for us, we also did not want, as I say, this is part of our economic development strategy. So we didn't want just to have a company producing molecules and exporting it. We, as a government, want to be investors in this project ourselves. And therefore, we have also strategically decided to partake, to have an equity participation in this through a fund that we call SD1 Namibia Fund. And through that fund, the government has now a 24% equity in this project. And we might have also started off to say this is green hydrogen, but I think we have also moved past that. So this is not just about green hydrogen. This is really a green industrialization project. It's not simply for exporting green hydrogen, but in our own industry, in our own economy, we need to start with some energy industry. For example, we've got steel. Why don't we produce green steel, for example? Mm-hmm. And therefore, it's no longer just for us to do this and export it, but to really make sure that it's part of our economy, and therefore there's a whole value chain, the whole ecosystem, so that it's become really beneficial to the economy and not just for export.
And that's a message we've heard quite a bit here, especially in regard to green hydrogen. Another message that we did hear, let me ask you a very quick follow-up question, but with the request for a short answer, if you don't mind. Namibia also came in for mention earlier today in regard to water, because green hydrogen is, of course, a very water-hungry production process. And the question was, how can a country like Namibia embark on this? How can you ensure the kind of amount of clean water that you're going to need? And it's a very high quality level, as I understand it, given the fact that you also have a population that needs that water to drink.
Yep. Yeah. Namibia is a very dry country, and therefore water is really a problem. We depend mostly on underground water, but luckily for us, the resource, the wind resource we have got and the solar resource is just alongside the coast. We have got a long coastline, therefore we are going to use seawater, and then we're going to desalinate that water, and that become then the source of the water that we are going to be using, and to use all the industries. So it's going to be desalination. In fact, making even a much bigger investment proposals, not only to produce green hydrogen, but also to desalinate the water. And also maybe just quickly to say, we have got this project, but it's not only one project. We have got pockets of winds and solar in the southern part of the countries, in the western part of the country, also in the northern parts. And during the last quarter of this year, we are going to float another request for proposal so that we can invest other investors that can work with us on the second and third project for producing these molecules.
Thank you. Let me go to Rachel Fakhri now, and the Inflation Reduction Act has come up for quite a bit of mention here also over the course of the last 2 days, and it does include measures to boost domestic production of green hydrogen. The US economy's demand for this commodity is expected to be massive. So will you still have any capacity to export? Will you need imports? How do you see the balance on trade? And what is the government's strategy for trying to essentially overcome the hurdles in bringing suppliers and off-takers together?
Thanks so much, Melinda, and thanks to the organizers for the very successful conference of the past 2 days. I wasn't expecting this big of an audience at the very kind of end of it, so it's really wonderful to see that. So all difficult questions to answer because the uncertainty in this market remains huge, right? So would briefly push back against the notion that demand in the US will be massive. It's really unclear. Demand signals haven't been showing up. Yes, the Inflation Reduction Act does offer the largest subsidy for production of hydrogen in the world. The demand isn't showing up just yet, and that is actually chilling quite a bit of investment in the US. But there's a lot of technology uncertainty as well. We know this is going to be a useful resource in those really hard to electrify sectors, but the scope of the role it will play remains really uncertain. So because of all these uncertainties, there is still no kind of real concerted US government strategy around exports, imports, trade, or any of that. We are seeing them starting to signal export ambitions. So in the US National Hydrogen Strategy, which came out last year, there are these kind of high-level references to setting up a future export market, starting with putting together the regulatory structure for that in the early 2030s, and that's about it. So I do believe the US sees itself more as a long-term exporter. Now, having said that, because now we have the largest subsidy for production in the world for clean hydrogen, projects are starting to show up and be announced that are more geared towards exports. So the gigascale projects that are being announced, we'll see if they will actually materialize. But this gives you a sense of where investor interest and appetite is. It is far more geared towards export, in particular into Europe, in the form of green ammonia for now. So the market is starting to gear itself towards exports given EU's demand signals. But other than that, everyone's still waiting to see how this market shapes up before regulations sort of kick in.
Thank you very much. And then I will continue down the panel with Mr. Yesimkhanov. And Kazakhstan is one of Central Asia's renewable energy pioneers. So, of course, that augurs well for hydrogen production. Tell us about your government's strategy, if you would, please, how you see the role of green hydrogen in decarbonizing your economy, and whether you expect to have sufficient capacity to export.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this BETD. This is the first time that we join this session, and this has been very positive for us on an emotional level. My English is not very good. This is why I asked to be able to speak in Russian. So I'd like to start by giving you some figures to show you the development of the past 10 years. We are developing the renewable sector very clearly. So renewables account for 13% of our energy mix. That includes hydropower, but I'd like to give you some more figures. We have 115 megawatt hours. That's been our electricity use. We have 300 megawatts from wind power, and we want to continue to develop this issue and green hydrogen in particular. So our country has adopted a strategy on this, and by 2060 we want to reach net zero. And green hydrogen is the most important building block in this. We also want to adopt a concept for the development of the hydrogen sector, and our German colleagues will help us with this. We are also very grateful for this. Of course, we're aware that our country is not a large consumer of energy, but this makes exports all the more interesting. Decarbonization of the steel sector is, of course, important for us, but we also need exports. And transport in this context is very important. We are in Central Asia, and we haven't made as much progress as the colleagues in Namibia have made. We're doing the first step right now. We've started to work with a German company. We want to produce up to 2 million tons of green hydrogen during this first phase. Water is an important question for us as well, because we want to use desalination at the Caspian Sea in order to be able to produce hydrogen there. And this is not only about exporting hydrogen, it's also about green production that we could use in agriculture, where fertilizers are concerned, for instance. So this is the cooperation we are aiming for within Germany and the European Union, and we hope that you will support us to become leading in this field.
Thank you very much. I go to Jonas Moberg now, and the Green Hydrogen Organization is an NGO with the worldwide mission, I am now quoting, of dramatically accelerating production and utilization of green hydrogen. I like the word dramatically in there. Please share your perspective on how you do that, on what are the crucial levers, and also how fast you see the market currently advancing, where the first operational projects are, and when you, in fact, ramp up of international trade to be feasible.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, everyone. My goodness, it's got to be dramatic. It's got to be super dramatic, because we don't stand a chance in hell to avert climate disaster unless we do that. And we often hear about, we need to go back to the Second World War and look at how dramatically we started to increase the plane production in some countries and so on. We can do it, but we need to get on with it. You're right, we're seeing relatively small volumes at the moment, but we've got to be very clear. More than 50% of all renewable energy investment is happening in one country alone at the moment, and that is in China. They managed to install 293 gigawatt of wind and solar last year. That's more than double what they did in 2022. So we can do it. There are a number of other countries, like I visited 2 weeks ago in India. One of the projects I visited was alone 30 gigawatts, ready to produce 1 million tons of green ammonia in 27. So there are many places where it's happening, and what we're hearing from Oman and from Namibia is absolutely fantastic. So it is happening in a number of places. Can you see this blue sign?
Not yet, but if you want, we can put it up already.
Could we get that up, please?
Dear Raji, could we have the graphic up on the big screens, please?
Let me talk a little bit.
Let me just check. Is it there?
No, not yet. Yes, here we are. Okay. So let's focus on that for a couple of minutes then. So high production costs. Well, compared to what, Melinda? Because if oil and gas is pretty expensive, the cost is in relative terms not that high. So I guess what's implicit in the whole question is, how do we find our customers? And at the moment, the problem is we're not finding the customers because it is too expensive compared to carbon-intensive fuels. That is the implicit question. So let's focus on that. Now, the high production cost is also falling very, very quickly. So let's also be clear about that issue. Sales price uncertainty. I think actually, to a large extent, there are now, and we have worked on a number of offtake agreements, pricing clauses, risk-sharing agreements. That's the sort of stuff that facilitators like us can help with. There are many good, expensive lawyers there that are prepared to work pro bono with us and others on coming up with solutions. So it's actually being addressed to a large extent. Missing infrastructure, well, that depends a little bit on what we're talking about. And a lot of infrastructure is being built. And in Oman, you can use a lot of the already available infrastructure. It depends on what kind of hydrogen and green ammonia we are going to use. Is it for steel? Is it for fertilizers? And so on. When it comes to, for example, fertilizers, yes, it's a big issue because we essentially need a totally new supply chain. Whereas with some of the other use cases, a little bit less so. I'll come back to non-uniform sustainability standards, this topic.
We're coming back to that in the next round.
Oh,
anyway.
right. Oh, sorry.
That's a big focus in the next round.
Okay,
so
cool.
You can give us your quick view.
I will be super quick, sorry.
Okay.
Because we have a standard on sustainability.
I know.
Including
We're going
on
there.
water.
We're going to
but
that
anyway,
topic.
Non-availability on finance. Look, there is a lot of finance available there. And I do actually think that one of the really exciting things is seeing how the multilateral development banks, the World Banks, and also a lot of bilaterals like KfW are getting their actions together and working quite a lot with both the industry and hosting governments to make sure that we crowd in the financial, the private sector finance that we need. Unclear political framework conditions. Yes, it is a moving feast, but day by day, like we heard announcements here this week from Robert Habeck and others, we are getting increasingly better at creating the market conditions the private sector needs to scale up.
Great. Thank you very much. So we will pick up on a number of those messages, but yes, that's the applause for the dramatic presentation that you gave us on the dramatic need to accelerate. Let's go to Deputy Minister Grunchuk now, waiting patiently there on screen. And Ukraine has the potential to become the major European supplier of green H2, given your abundant supply of renewable energy and your existing gas supply infrastructure and network. However, Russia's ongoing attacks and market barriers do hold you back. So how is your government responding to those, and what policies can you and are you putting in place now to ramp up when conditions improve?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you very well. Thank you.
First of all, my great appreciation for the invitation in this panel discussion on development of green hydrogen, because raising such topics is a crucial step towards achieving the climate neutrality for all European continent and especially for Ukraine. But before delving into the focal issue, I want to highlight the few current conditions in Ukraine and the conditions under which we are building our green economy and energy transition. You well know that over the past 2 years of war, energy facilities and energy infrastructure was the main target for Russia's attack. And currently we lost really a lot, more than 50% of our generation capacity, grids, but thanks to the support of our international partners, especially for the energy sector, we have ensured the stable operation of the country's integrated energy system. And the winter of 2024 passed without significant power outages, not like previous winter. This fact is primarily due to the hard work of the people and the massive repair campaign we conducted. But returning to the main topic of our panel, I want to emphasize that we have not paused for a moment in fulfill the commitment that Ukraine undertook before and during the military aggression. We are reforming during war, approaching energy transition and development sustainability approaches within the energy sector development. In 2023, Ukraine adopted the energy strategy of Ukraine for the period up to 2050, which outlines key strategic goals such as climate neutrality in the energy sector till 2050, renewable modernization of energy infrastructure, as well as promotion of the development of renewable energy sources and alternative fuels like hydrogen. As the EU, we also recognize hydrogen as a key technology for decarbonizing the hard-to-abate sectors, and as another dimension of Ukraine's EU integration. In this regard, we are in the final stage of preparing our hydrogen strategy for 2050, which we plan to adopt this year. The hydrogen strategy envisage hydrogen production for export amounting to 1.5 million tons per year, as well as for domestic use and the reconstruction of the industrial sector, particularly chemical industry and the development of green steel. At the end of the last year, the European Commission adopted also the first list of projects of common interest and projects of mutual interest, which fully aligned with the goals of the European Green Deal including the Central European Hydrogen Corridor, which aims to provide competitive transportation of renewables hydrogen from Ukraine through Slovakia and Czech Republic to Germany and other European countries. The project is planned to be implemented by 2030. And currently, the hydrogen strategy project includes the implementation of existing pilot projects we have in Ukraine and initiatives in the hydrogen sector. For us, advancing the hydrogen technologies presents an opportunity to generate green employment, aligning with the Green Deal and energy transition objectives. Hydrogen strategy includes complex solutions for establishing the fundamental principles of hydrogen industry development in Ukraine until 2050. It outlines the main stages and strategic goals along with the methods of achieving them based on available resources, technologies, and potential volume of hydrogen production, domestic consumption, export to European Union, as well as hydrogen transportation and storage. We're also looking for the development, the Research Center for Development Hydrogen Technologies in Ukraine. And we recognize that enacting climate policies is crucial not only for safeguarding the humanity from a disaster like climate change, but also for halting conflicts by regimes funded by fossil fuels like we have now at this moment. And for Ukraine, the green development is the main priority, and we see a lot of opportunities for us because we understand that we need to rebuild our energy system on more greener, sustainable way. And despite the war, we have the opportunity to develop the technologies like green hydrogen with your support in good cooperation with our European and not just European partners. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. And we will come back a little bit later to talk about cooperation, but let's take a deep dive now to look at the role of certification and standards. Could we get our graphic back up on the screens, please, dear Regie, that shows the rankings? Yeah. So we see that the audience, we have about 13% saying that that is a central factor. I'm wondering whether our panel also sees it that way, and I'll just again go across the panel to talk a little bit about the role of standards and certification, and I'll begin, if I may, with Minister Alguendo this time. In the green hydrogen projects that your country has put out to tender so far, sustainability standards do play an important role. Can you tell us what you see as the most important requirements to ensure economic, social, and ecological sustainability, and also whether you believe that such standards are a comparative advantage or disadvantage for sellers on the international market?
I think we all agree that you need to have standards of definition of what is green hydrogen, or whatever it is we are now. There must be a commonly agreed to say this is the standard, this is the definition of what it is, these are the scheme, this is how we are going to certify the scheme. What I see might be a problem is how do we get to those standards and those schemes? Who develops them? And what goes into that discussions? What we do not want to see is a situation where you got one or two or three countries who will get together and says this will be the standards. We need to have standards that are debated, that are agreed by at least all those who has got an interest to want to say this is what we think it should look like.
Who would you say is, who are the drivers for that? What is the forum where that could and should?
The drivers, there are various grouping now saying, oh, these are going to be the standards. But the way we are seeing that, some of the developing countries that might also have got an interest there, they are not part of that discussion at all. And what we are afraid that one day we are going to be told, these are the standards, and you must abide by these standards. That will not actually be really a good collaboration effort, and therefore, we are asking that those who are busy with defining these standards, let's talk about these things. It should not be, it might look like that it will end up now the standard developed by the consuming market, for example, but not where the product is being produced. So that's very, very important. So but we need to have those standards. If we don't do that, what is likely to happen again? Because we are going to be trading in these molecules, for example. What's going to happen now is that you got these standards, and some people will be excluded simply because of those standards. And then that is more or less like, for example, some of the developing countries right now, the WTO, for example, standards. We are complaining that these are standards that have got nothing to do with what we haven't discussed them. But now our trading system is going to be impacted by those standards. So what we are asking, yes, we need to have those standards, but that's be developed by all of us and agreed by all of us. Otherwise, it will be a problem for some of us.
Let me ask you, I'm trying to keep us on track with time, so I'm going to ask again for a short answer, if you would. This is a big topic we could spend a lot of time on, but the EU has issued rules for a definition of green hydrogen. Did they talk to you?
Oh, not really like, that's like official, let's talk about it. It's like, yeah, we have developed this is our online comment on that. That's not how you go about it. You cannot be given something and say comment about it, and whatever you own comment, your comments can be disregarded. But we need to have a body where everybody is invited around the table to say, what are your views about how this should look like? That would be the best way to go about it, but not to be given a product and somebody say comment about this thing. That's not how we think we should go about it.
Thank you. Let me go over to Rachel. And at the NRDC, you have been advocating for strict criteria defining green hydrogen for the US market along the lines that were introduced by the European Union in 2023. So 2 questions to you. First of all, what do you say to Minister Alwendo's comments? And some critics say such standards are too strict and that they will hamper the growth of production and trade. So question what you say to that as well.
Yeah, that's a huge topic, and I'm going to spare the audience a huge double click on it. But if you're interested in this big debate in the US around indeed those 3 criteria for hydrogen production, come and find me. Happy to chat. I think Minister Alwendo raises a really important issue, and I think I'll answer it as the second question and answer the first one first. Will these rules hamper deployment? We're not seeing any evidence of that. And the EU is a really interesting case study. The pipeline of announced projects, of projects going to FID, has been increasing since the adoption of the rules. In the context of the US, we're seeing very similar projections and kind of movement of projects. And as I mentioned earlier, interestingly, a lot of the first mover projects are geared towards exporting into Europe. So we're not even seeing evidence that somehow those European rules have chilled investments to import into the EU. Meanwhile, I cannot stress enough the significance of those rules in building public trust and public confidence in this molecule. Which of course is a backbone of setting up a trade system. Because what these rules effectively are a way to prevent that hydrogen production ends up driving more fossil fuel generation on the grid to meet the pretty large demand for hydrogen, and stymieing grid decarbonization. Hydrogen projects that do that will not receive the public confidence or trust they need to increase deployment. So this is a very important issue in the context of trade as well. Conscious of kind of Minister Alwendo's issues around the prescription of these rules, there are kind of efforts starting to figure out how do you meet the intent of the rules without this prescription of it? How do we make sure hydrogen projects are not driving more fossil fuel generation on the grid, right? And there are ways of doing that. The 3 pillars are a straightforward way for the EU and the US. There are ways to kind of translate that intent to other countries. Again, within the kind of the whole frame of making sure this resource is not hindering grid decarbonization, which is the #1 superpower we have to stay the 1.5 degree course. And want to know a couple of things. I think the real hindrance...
Briefly, if you would.
Yes,
I'm terribly sorry, but our time is
the real
flying
hindrance to
away.
trade is probably going to be very much along the lines of what is here. So the lack of demand, the fragmentation of standards, right? If no one agrees what is clean hydrogen, few people will invest in kind of capital-intensive infrastructure to kind of trade that globally. So there are different hurdles to trade.
Thank you very much. And let me jump over to Deputy Minister Günçük, if I may. And again, the European Union's Renewable Energy Directive has adopted strict sustainability standards and certification schemes. How do those impact Ukraine's green H2 plans? Are they an opportunity or an impediment?
For this question, what I could say is that we are developing our policy now totally in line with European standards, because we just started the association negotiation, and we understand that we need to adopt all the regulations, European regulations, in our policies. And now we are working together with our European partners, with the European Commission, for developing our policy, our legislation, totally in line with European Union legislation. We have a lot of potential to produce and to transport the hydrogen. And I think that it's a big opportunity, not just for Ukraine and for all Europe, because we had enough lands, enough specialists, enough water and other resources for production and transportation hydrogen, green hydrogen. You know that one small example, now we started few small pilot projects, how to produce and transport hydrogen in Ukraine for local consumption. And also we will start very soon the project together with Germany for the estimate the possibility to use our gas transportation system for green hydrogen transportation. And also what is very important that we have enough we have understanding that that we need to use this opportunity even now. And we, for example, during last year, we established new renewable energy capacity, renewable energy generation, more than 1 gigawatt of 1 gigawatt is despite the war, and we will continue and using this new renewable energy capacities for hydrogen production too as well.
Indeed, and in fact, your ministry was represented here last year and did tell us about those projects and how important they are, because they are decentral, and the fact that that is extremely helpful when your energy system is under attack. Let me go now to Minister Al-Alfi, if I may, and I'd like to talk about the proliferation of standards and hear from you whether that is impacting the efforts that you have told us about, because you're already lining up contracts. You are projected by the IEA to probably become the biggest green H2 exporter in the Middle East, and I think one of the 6 biggest in the world. So these conflicting, inconsistent standards and certification schemes, do they represent an issue?
Well, first of all, we did participate in some of the discussions when the European standards are being formed. So we have plugged ourselves in. I don't think you should be waiting to be invited. It's important, if you are serious about being a developer, is to plug yourself in and shape the future together with your partners. So we have been in communication with our partners here in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and of course in Brussels itself. So we have contributed, whether our comments have been taken into consideration or not. I think a lot of it have been. We have also worked with our Belgian partners to test drive some of the European certification on one of our projects. And we recently concluded that the project passes with green colors, and literally green colors, all the certification requirement. We also tested it against different scenarios that we are building in Oman. And for what we know today, it looks like we probably will be succeeding in achieving all the requirements to be able to supply and ship to the European market. Of course, it's more stringent than the Far East. We have also, because of this uncertainty, taken a position that we will design our system to be able to take the most stringent standards available. So we are not using the existing infrastructure. We are building completely new infrastructure, completely ring-fenced from any gray power generation, gray water generation, gray ammonia generation. So it's all going to be 100% green. The pipelines are going to be new. The renewable energy are going to be new. The electric cables are going to be new. The hydrogen pipelines will be new. The water supply will be new. The desalination plants will be new. And all of that is to make sure that there are no standards that we cannot meet. My comment on the standard was, and I think I made it and people laughed, if we are unable to meet the European standards, then the European standards are wrong.
Oh, okay.
Because there are no other standards that you can put that we cannot meet. Now, having said that, and I'm not trying to
I'd say lucky you.
is really important that you plug in and understand where the standards are going, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're here to discuss with a lot of partners from the government. Of course, we are connected with Brussels, with Belgium, with the Netherlands, who are the main importers, and with Germany, who are the main sort of consumers, and of course our partners in the Far East. So I feel confident and comfortable, but there will always be obstacles, and we will work them out.
But you have clearly described a massive investment that you are making in order to bring this online, because we so often hear, oh, well, one of the comparative advantages of green hydrogen will be reuse of existing infrastructure, and you're telling me, I don't know.
No, we can't, simply because, number one, I need to use the existing infrastructure for the existing hydrocarbon production, and that will continue.
Okay.
Number two, we want to build a completely new infrastructure so that we can meet all the potential standards that will be thrown on our way.
Interesting.
In terms of investment, we are estimating that we probably will be investing between $40 to $60 billion over the next 5 years in order to meet all the demands that the supply that I mentioned, but also, of course, working with our partners on how are we going to ship it. Is it going to be ammonia? Is it going to be liquid hydrogen? And some people don't believe it. I do, personally. Is it going to be liquid organic hydrogen carrier? Is it going to be a chemical form? We are working in all the different options.
Right.
In addition to that, we are also working on options for storage so that we can increase the efficiency of the electrolyzers and make sure that we bring the cost down, which makes us as competitive landing price to Europe as possible.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Vice Minister Yesemin Akhlanov, if I may, to also ask about the same issue, proliferation of inconsistent certification and standards, particularly given the fact that you have signed a memorandum of understanding with the EU that includes developing green hydrogen supply chains. Would you take the same view that you're just going to aim for the top and that's going to become your standard, or are you taking a different approach?
Ну, как вы сказали, очень кратко отвечу, наверное, после комментариев моих коллег добавить этот вопрос, наверное, много будет сложно. Мы, да, подписали соответствующий меморандум с Европейским Союзом, и мы уполномоченные органы, которые отвечают за стандартизацию, уже изучают и совместно, и международно.
Well,
Oh, okay. We didn't have translation for a moment. Now we're getting it. Sorry.
no, there was a slight technical issue. So there is indeed a memorandum of understanding, as you said, with the European Union, and it was difficult for me to add anything because my colleagues so comprehensively already answered that question. I mean, we do need standards, not just for green hydrogen, I believe. We need standards in general, covering a wide range of criteria: efficiency, safety, the quality of the water that we are using for hydrogen production. So I think it is indeed important that we develop standards that don't cause a sudden increase in prices, for example. And I agree with the ministers that we really have to talk to the stakeholders and enter into a dialogue, a true dialogue. And we have to meet the strictest standards, of course, which is why we are grateful for this cooperation with our partners in Germany. And
we keep a very close eye on this, and we, of course, try to meet the strictest of standards.
Thank you very much. And Jonas, I'm coming to you last because I'd like you to give us a kind of overview now of your own green hydrogen standard that your organization has developed as a global certification scheme. You have said that we need consistent standards to really ramp up global trade and market confidence. Rachel also mentioned confidence as key. So tell us something about the design of your standard, who you've been talking to get to that standard, and also perhaps how it would compare with the EU approach, because Europe so often thinks of itself as the driver in the public regulatory area, whether it's GDP, the global data rule, or the AI package. It kind of thinks of itself as being a first mover when it comes to regulation. So how much does your standard conform to theirs?
It's precisely because what all of these have said that we brought together a big group of governments, including the Namibian, a number of companies, including some of the ones that are in Oman, like ACME, CWP, in some other countries like Mauritania here, and Fortescue, and a number of civil society campaigning organizations like Rachel, and developed the Green Hydrogen Standard. It's one of a number of efforts. It rests on 3 pillars. The first pillar relates to the emissions content. What kind of power can you buy? And in particular, if you grid connect things, that becomes a big issue. In particular, in countries like the US, where the grid uses a lot of coal. That's why Rachel can talk to you about that for a very, very, very long time. The detail of those rules are of profound importance. It has to be, we're not here to promote green hydrogen. Let's get real about that. We're here to decarbonize. And if we don't get that buying green renewable energy right, forget it. Okay? That's the first pillar. And we have said in the standard, these stakeholders agreed 1 kilo of CO2 per kilo hydrogen. And that's a good measure. On that, we can compete with fossil fuel-based hydrogen, with carbon capture, and so on. It's also, when it comes to this first pillar, where there is just about all regulations are moving in different directions, as we've heard about the EU and so on, and most countries are likely to set rules that suits their energy profile. And we got to make sure that any standard that is global interacts, satisfies these rules, while at the same time, not have a drive towards the bottom. Okay? The second pillar is we got to have wider ESG requirements. We've heard about water, for example. That is one of those where we need new protocols on desalination, what to do with the brine, a whole range of different issues. And that is why we have a particular working group on, for example, water management. So that's the second pillar, making sure that it's done responsibly. If we don't do that, we're not going to be the solution we're claiming. The third pillar is we got to force the developers to set out the upside. What do I mean by that? How is your project satisfying, contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals? In what way is it creating jobs locally? Is it just for export, or how is it taking industry along with it in the country where we're talking? And of course, this is where one of the great challenges with hydrogen is potentially also so good, and that is that it's in many ways hard to transport. And that means that it's quite often makes quite a lot of industrial sense, as we've heard, to actually from the beginning look at what kind of industries can it propel also locally. So that is the Green Hydrogen Standard.
Thank you very much. Going forward, Jonas, what groups, what institutions would you work with to try to move the standardization process more quickly? You talked about accelerating and dramatic need.
Yeah, look, I think we always need to start with governments, and the kinds of emissions rules, like we've heard on the EU, they are an absolute key here. It's bringing along the companies, it's looking at the whole supply chain to make sure that each step is accounted for. We also need to work with oil and gas industry to make sure that for example, when it comes to their standards, that they actually require site-specific methane reporting. Because if they don't, and they start they in a sense will have an advantage that isn't costing in the actual associated emissions. And there are a number of international processes underway here that we all need to engage in.
We have 48 seconds. Would it be possible to get the rest of the panel to say one sentence about your top priority in international cooperation, whatever that might be? I'm just going to really ask for one sentence because we need to try to end on time. Minister.
My top priority is aligning with off-takers. I want to know where the market is. We keep hearing big numbers coming from the politicians, but what translate into the grounds from the people who are actually ultimately buying is a little bit different. So we are talking to the buyers on an individual basis, and that's the only way we can get it done.
Thank you. Minister?
My top ask is to say, let's agree to create an international recognized body that will come up with standards, so that we don't end up having European standards, American standards, Australian standards, but there's that one body that we all recognize, and we subscribe to those standards.
Thank you. Rachel?
Agreement on how to establish high-fidelity standards to make sure hydrogen does not stymie grid decarbonization.
Vice Minister?
Well, I'm not going to touch upon the individual standards because I think we are still on the way of developing these standards, but we should not be afraid of experimenting with different ways of doing this.
Thank you. Then I'll jump over to Deputy Minister Glinchuk.
Yes, thank you. I think for us the priority is to build the new system with the European standards and to use the possibilities, to use all the resources for the new future, decarbonized and climate neutral future.
Jonas, would you like to add one more sentence to your last plea for cooperation?
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about offtake. One of the reasons we're struggling to finding our customers is because we're seeing a stiff competition from hydrogen with varying degree of carbon capture from fossil fuel undermining that product. So we need robust standards for everyone, and we need to remember that it is by setting those robust standards we will help our market to take off.
Thank you very, very much to all of you. What a fascinating and rich discussion we have had. I wish you much success in your endeavors. Let's give them a very warm round of applause.